What if I told you that what you're giving up for Lent, it doesn't matter? That the thing you're giving up this year, the sweets, the coffee, the social media break, whatever it is, means absolutely nothing if you're not actually allowing yourself to be transformed. Because let's be honest here, how many times have you entered into Lent with some half-hearted sacrifice, something you could just easily go without for 40 days, only to return to exactly who you were before Ash Wednesday, the moment Easter morning hits? How many times have you treated Lent like a seasonal diet for the soul, a quick reset button to make yourself feel like you're doing something holy, but without any real conversion of heart? Let me be crystal clear. God is not interested in your temporary sacrifices if they don't change you. Lent is not a game. It's not a spiritual weight loss challenge. It's a war against your comfort, against your attachments, against your laziness and your excuses, a war against everything in you that resists God's call to holiness. Because if you're not using this time to break free from sin, to kill your vices, and to train your soul in the discipline of holiness, honey, you're wasting it. And the devil loves when you waste Lent. The church, in her wisdom, calls us to prayer, fasting, and almsgiving, not as rituals, but as weapons to kill the old self, to train the soul, and to follow Christ to the cross. That's what mortification is. And if that word makes you uncomfortable, good, because that means we're getting to the heart of the matter. So today, we're going to break it all down, what true mortification actually is, and why most people get it wrong. Why just giving something up is not enough. How mortification should bring you closer to Christ, not just for Lent, but for the rest of your life. And how to start embracing real sacrificial love for God, not just seasonal self-denial. Because if we truly understood what Lent is meant to do in our souls, we'd stop playing around with it. We'd stop giving up things for 40 days and calling it holiness, and start giving ourselves completely to Christ in a way that actually changes us. So let's go ahead and talk about it, because honey, it doesn't matter what you give up for Lent unless, let's go. What true mortification is and what it's not. Lent is not about suffering for suffering's sake. Let's get that straight right now, because too many people approach mortification like it's some spiritual Tough Mudder race, gritting their teeth, pushing through discomfort just to say they did something difficult. But that's not the point. That's not what mortification actually is. Mortification isn't about seeing how much pain you can endure. It's about putting to death everything in you that resists holiness. The word itself, mortification, comes from the Latin word mortificare, which means to put to death. And what exactly are we putting to death? Our disordered desires, our attachment to sin, our love for comfort over Christ. Because whether we admit it or not, most of us are enslaved to food, to entertainment, to distractions, to scrolling, to gossip, to sloth, to constant craving for pleasure and ease. We've forgotten how to say no. And mortification is God's way of retraining us to discipline our flesh, strengthen our souls, and become truly free. 2 big lies about mortification. So let's expose 2 of the biggest lies people believe about mortification and Lent. Lie number 1, mortification means doing something extreme. Some people think that mortification means taking Herculean sacrifices, fasting until they're weak, sleeping on the floor, taking cold showers, walking barefoot on gravel. Look, if you're called into deep asceticism, God bless you, and that's great. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but for most people, real mortification is ordinary, everyday sacrifices. One of my favorite saints, Saint Jose Maria Escrivá, in The Way said, "Great holiness consists in carrying out the little duties of each moment." It's not about how extreme the sacrifice is. It's about how much of yourself you give to God in it. Lie number 2, Lent is just about giving up stuff. Lent is not a Catholic version of New Year's resolutions. Giving up chocolate, social media, Netflix, you know what? Hey, that's nice. But if it's not ordering your soul towards God, it's just a temporary diet. The real question is, does this sacrifice help me to grow in virtue? Does it make me more patient? Does it make me more humble, more self-controlled, more loving? because mortification isn't about what you give up. Again, it's about who you're becoming. Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 27, I discipline my body and I make it my slave, lest after preaching to others, I myself should be disqualified. That's what mortification is, a spiritual training ground where we discipline ourselves so that nothing, not sin, not comfort, not pleasure, not laziness, has control over us except God. The heart of mortification, a death that leads to life. When Jesus went into the desert for 40 days, he wasn't just avoiding food. He was killing every distraction, every comfort, every earthly attachment so that he could be perfectly united to the Father's will. And that's what mortification should do for us. We die to ourselves so that we can live fully for Christ. We discipline our bodies so that we can become stronger, freer, and more ready to do his will. We detach from comfort so that we learn to cling to Christ alone, because the greatest tragedy is not that we suffer, it's that we waste our suffering. And the only worse thing than wasting suffering is wasting Lent. So what's it going to be? Are you going to go through Lent unchanged? Are you ready to take on a real mortification that actually transforms you? Easy enough said, but let's get down to exactly what that looks like. No fluff, no empty sacrifices, just real practical everyday ways to live this out starting now. Why mortification matters. Let's get real here. Let's look at things from a biblical standpoint. If mortification for the soul and the body wasn't necessary, Jesus wouldn't have done it and would not have given us the perfect example. He wouldn't have fasted for 40 days in the wilderness. He wouldn't have allowed himself to be beaten, mocked, humiliated, and crucified at his passion. He wouldn't have chosen suffering when he could have avoided it. He prayed 3 times not to die, but he said to the Father, may your will be done. And he did. He was teaching us that mortification is not about self-inflicted pain, but it's about self-giving love. And if we refuse to mortify ourselves, if we reject suffering, if we reject sacrifice, if we reject discipline, we are rejecting the very means by which Christ saved us. So let's make something absolutely clear. There is no holiness without mortification. None. If you're not mortifying yourself, if you're not truly sacrificing, honey, you're not growing in holiness. You're just coasting. And the last thing any of us should be doing in the spiritual life is coasting. But why does mortification matter so much? Because the flesh is weak. Because we are naturally inclined towards sin, towards comfort, towards choosing the easy road instead of the narrow one. This is what the church calls concupiscence, the tendency to be drawn towards sin even when we know it's wrong. And unless we train ourselves, unless we actively fight against our disordered desires, sin will always win. St. Paul puts it plainly in Romans chapter 7, verse 19, for I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I keep doing. Sound familiar? This is why mortification matters, because unless we intentionally deny ourselves, we will always fall back into the same sins, the same weaknesses, the same cycles. And Christ did not die for us to stay the same. Mortification is the training ground for heaven. Think of it like this. An athlete doesn't win a championship by accident. A soldier doesn't walk into a battle without training. And a Christian doesn't become a saint without mortification. Once again, our boy St. Paul, he understood this when he wrote in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 24 to 25. Do you not know that in a race, all the runners run, but only one receives the prize? So run that you might get the prize. Every athlete exercises self-control in all things. That's what mortification is, spiritual training. It strengthens our will. It makes us warriors. It prepares us for the fight against temptation and say yes to God in every moment. Because holiness doesn't happen by accident. If you don't mortify yourself now, honey, you won't be ready when temptation actually comes. You won't be ready when the suffering hits. You won't be ready to stand for Christ when the world turns against you. And let's be real, That time is coming. If you want to know the true meaning of mortification, look at Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane. He wasn't just suffering physically. He was in agony. He was sweating blood. He was praying 3 times for that cup to pass. And yet, what did he say? Not my will, but yours be done. That's what mortification is. Not my will, but yours, my Lord. Yours be done. In that moment, Jesus didn't want to suffer. He didn't have to, but he chose to because he loved us more than he loved his own comfort. That's the level of love that we are called to. A love that is stronger than self-preservation. A love that is willing to be uncomfortable, willing to sacrifice, willing to lay everything down for God. Mortification matters because without it, we will always choose ourselves over Christ. And he deserves so much more from us. The challenge, will you live for Christ or just yourself? So here's the question. Are you willing to die to yourself so that Christ can truly live in you this Lent? Are you willing to stop making excuses, stop clinging to comfort, and actually fight for holiness this Lent? Because that's what it comes down to. Mortification just isn't a nice idea. It's a requirement. If we refuse to embrace it, we are refusing to take up our cross. But this might be a lot for some of you. I want to get a little practical. So how do you actually live this out? What are real everyday ways to practice mortification that will make a difference, not just for Lent, but for life? Practical mortifications for Lent that can be extended beyond it. All right, so I know that was a little intense. We really tackled some of the misconceptions around Lent. We exposed how most people approach mortification and sacrifice the wrong way, either by treating it like meaningless challenge or just think it has to be this extreme thing to be effective. But let's get practical. We want to make this about small, consistent sacrifices that rewire your soul to put Christ first. So if your mortification, again, if it doesn't make you more patient, more humble, more self-disciplined, it's worthless. So here's the first thing to do. Mortify small daily habits to cultivate discipline. Think about the little comforts that you own. Do you need coffee in the morning just to function like me? Honey, listen, take it black. No sugar, no cream. Do you reach for your phone the moment you wake up? Don't. Do you snack constantly because you just feel like it? Stop grazing in between meals. Do you take long hot showers? Oh, honey, try that lukewarm water instead. And if you're really ballsy, try the cold water. These might seem like small things, but mortification isn't about size. It's about training your will to say no. And if you can't say no to the little things, how will you ever say no to the big temptations? Mortify the body through physical discipline. If you think the body doesn't matter in your spiritual life, honey, think again. Paul literally compares the Christian life to training for a race. So I do not run aimlessly. I do not box as someone beating the air. No, I strike a blow to my body and I make it my slave, lest after preaching to others, I myself should be disqualified for the prize. That's 1 Corinthians. Your body is a temple for the Holy Spirit. But are you treating it that way? If you avoid working out or training because it's uncomfortable, honey, guess what? Start training. Go for walks. Go to the gym. Do some home workouts. If you make excuses about not having time, schedule it in. If you're sluggish and unmotivated, get up and move. Do something. Your body was made to serve God. So strengthen it, train it, mortify it. Make this a part of your Lent, because if you're too weak to discipline your body, you'll be too weak to discipline your soul, baby. Punctuality and time management as mortification. So let's be real for a minute. Some of y'all are chronically late and you know it. I'm guilty. And before you write that off as just how you are, ask yourself, what does my lack of discipline with time say about my spiritual discipline? Do you snooze your alarm 5 times every morning? Stop. Wake up immediately. Offer that first moment of your day to God. Do you procrastinate on things that you know you should be doing? Stop. Tackle them head on. Do you waste time scrolling on your phone instead of praying? Oh boy, stop. Redirect that time to something that actually feeds your soul. Punctuality and time management are acts of self-mastery. They're mortifications. And if you struggle with them, good. That means there's a real opportunity for growth here. Commit to a daily rosary, even when you don't feel like it. Now listen, if you don't pray the rosary every day, now's the time to start, right here during Lent. And yes, that's a mortification too, because let's be honest, there will be days when you don't want to, days when you're tired, days when it feels repetitive, days when it feels like nothing is happening in your prayer life. Pray it anyway, because every time you pick up those beads, you're walking through Christ's life with his mother. Every time you meditate on the mysteries, you're conforming yourself to Jesus Christ. And if you want to grow in holiness, you need to walk with him every single day. St. Louis de Montfort said, "If you say the rosary faithfully until death, I do assure you that in spite of the gravity of your sins, you shall receive a never fading crown of glory." Oh, I love that. That's not just some small promise. So commit to it, make time for it, and watch what God does in your soul. Fasting, not just about food, but ordering your desires. Let's get something straight right now. Lent is not Catholic Ramadan. Most people think fasting means just skipping a meal here and there. Oh no, honey. Fasting is about ordering your desires, not just your food. For food fasting, eat simple meals. Don't eat for pleasure, eat for sustenance. Stop snacking in between your meals. Eat what's in front of you without complaining, even if you don't like it. Sensory fasting, you can limit your social media use. Turn off the radio while driving. Use that time for prayer. Take a break from unnecessary entertainment. Emotional fasting. Stop complaining. Offer up little annoyances instead of venting. Choose silence instead of gossip. If it tempts you to overindulge, fast from it. Because fasting isn't about deprivation, it's about freedom. Detachment from comfort and luxury. How many of us are addicted to comfort? We need our food just right. We need our environment just right. We need our schedules just right. And if something throws us off, oh boy, we lose our peace. We go crazy. But here's the thing, comfort is not your God. If your happiness depends on everything going your way, you are a slave to your circumstances. So start practicing detachment. Sleep without an extra pillow. Go ahead and try it for a night. Sit in an uncomfortable chair without shifting. Offer up a headache instead of reaching for a medicine immediately. Stop avoiding difficult conversations out of fear. Because the more you detach from comfort, the more you will be attached to Christ. This is how you train your soul for heaven. All of this might sound a bit extreme to some of you, and that's good. But these are the small things. Heaven is for those who are willing to be uncomfortable for Christ. Jesus didn't carry the cross because it was easy. The saints didn't become saints because they did the bare minimum. And if you want real holiness, you need to train for it. So here is the challenge. Pick 3 of these mortifications. Start them now, today. They're super easy. Make them a part of your Lent. Make them a part of your spiritual life. Because we're not just doing this for 40 days. We're doing this to become saints. We want to get to heaven, you and me. And it's all about going deeper. Because Lent is your personal desert experience. And you want to use this time to lean on God's strength, not your own. Lent is a time to go into the wilderness with Christ. He's waiting for you. His hand is out there reaching for you to take it and to come with him, to allow this time to transform you. My Lent last year was the most powerful in my life because I experienced a true dark night of the soul moment that I shared here on this channel. And I created a playlist of those videos, which I hope to inspire you. And you can go ahead and check them out right over here. Take a look at these. And later this week, I'll follow up about how I'm doing 1 year later. I'll see you over there.